I'm here today to present something to the PAWT, now that I've been corrected on my spelling here, on the Sowams Heritage Area. How many have heard the name Sowams? Oh, good. Okay. That's the name of a whole settlement of Usamequin, otherwise called the Massasoit. Okay, his title was Massasoit. His name was Usamequin, meaning yellow feather, Usamequin. But he lived in what is today Warren. There wasn't any Warren then. At the time that the English separatists, the Pilgrims, came over, he wasn't living in Plymouth. And I think people who go to Plymouth and see the statue there think, well, if his statue is here, he must have lived here. No, he didn't live there. He walked 40 miles to Plymouth from what is today Warren. If you go to the town of Warren, stop by Town Hall. It's right on Main Street in the middle of town. And look up above the door, and you'll see this sculpture or frieze that says Sowams, 1621. Why would a town hall have a name Sowams? It's because that was the name of the town originally. It got named for Peter Warren in 1747 after Massachusetts gave up the town to Rhode Island. But the early town, starting in 1720, was called Sowams because that was the name of the settlement where Usamequin lived. Sowams was described by the separatists, in particular Ed Winslow, who came to visit there in July of 1621, and Miles Standish, who bought property there in what we don't know exactly where, but somewhere in that territory. He owned land. He never visited there, but as you can see, it was cleared land. I originally thought that Native people would have lived in a wooded area, but no, for thousands of years they burned the forest, both for hunting, but primarily for planting, because they raised corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, and they had acres and acres of this. It was described by Verrazano when he first came here in 1624. He talked about this cleared land going on for 20 or 30 miles up along the coast of Rhode Island. So you get a different picture. And when the English people came here and they saw this beautiful cleared land, what did they think? We want it, okay? Because we don't have this anymore in England, okay? It's all owned by people, and unless you want to be a indentured servant, you can't have land to work for farming. But here was all this open land, something that everybody wanted. If you go to any map of the time, in 1675, John Seller did a map of this area for the king. And in that map, you'll see, if I can get my pointer there, you see where it says Pawtuxet country, and then down below there, King Philip's country. Notice there's no name Wampanoag there. The name Wampanoag didn't exist, okay? It was Pawtuxet country then, led by the Massasoit Usamequin, who was Pawtuxet. As Warner Gookin in 1958 wrote, there's no doubt that the name Massasoit Sachamship was Pawtuxet, and it extended from the Cape all the way down to Narragansett Bay. This whole area was Pawtuxet country. If you look again more closely at that same map, you will see it identifies Mass Bay, Mohawk country, then in small letters, Massasoit's country, Pawtuxet country, King Philip's country, the Narragansetts, spelled that way, and Pequots, also spelled that way. This is a map made at that time, okay? And that's when any researcher wants to go back to original sources, not what somebody interpreted. So here is an original map that says nothing about Wampanoags, nothing. And again, if you look at Daniel Gookin's writings in 1792, he had done a survey of all the tribes in the area, and his map includes Pawtuxet, isn't that nice? Narragansett, Pequot, Pawtuxet, Massachusetts. Do you see the word Wampanoag there? No. Why? It didn't exist. Okay? There was no Wampanoag tribe until recently. And again, you look at other maps, and you will often see maps as that one in green labeled Wampanoag. It wasn't Wampanoag, it was Pawtuxet. These were the tribes. If you look at the yellow map up at the top, that was the territory that Usamiquan, the Massasoit, led. Over 60 tribes, sub-tribes, and clans throughout the southeastern Massachusetts area, all the way over to the Cape, but not including the Cape. The Cape was where Mashpee is, and that's where the Wampanoag home is. So people lived here for 10,000 years. Why did they not live here much before that? What was here 12,000 years ago? Pardon me? Ice. And lots of it, like a mile high full of ice, okay? Covered the whole area, up past Block Island, okay? The coastline, Narragansett Bay didn't exist then, okay? It wasn't until the glaciers melted, retreated, that the waters filled up, and that the coastline, the sea level rose when all the glaciers melted. So we know people couldn't have lived here before 12,000 years ago. Since 75,000 years before that is when the glaciers began. There was no human beings in North or South America at the time. So the only time people could have come here is after about 10,000 years ago, when the glaciers were retreated enough that the coastline began to open up, animals began to move in, and hunter-gatherers came into the area. That's why we know how long people, human beings, have lived in this area, okay? They began villages all around the area, and were very successful. We have no evidence of major famine, major warfare, great dyings of all kinds of people until 1619. People lived here very successfully, all right? And then in the 1500s, a lot of ships from Europe, Portugal, England, France, and Spain began coming to North America, and primarily for fishing. But when they came, they discovered all these villages. This is a map that Champlain left of Cape Cod in 1605. Does that look like an unpopulated area? No, there are whole villages there, okay? And what he was saying in 1605 was, we're not going to settle here because there are too many people here, all right? The place was full. And it wasn't until Smith went back and explored the coast in 1607 from England, he left instructions to Thomas Hunt to explore the area, but Hunt decided on his own that he was going to go back to England with some of the native people and kidnap 24 native people on the Cape and took them to England. Okay, that's the first enslavement that happened then. Imagine how the families felt that their sons had disappeared and were never to be seen again. One of those people ends up being Samoset, who came and greeted the pilgrims. So ships came from England, France, and Spain. They came mostly for fishing, but also for trade. But they didn't bring their women and children. They weren't here to colonize. They were here just to trade. And that was fine with the native people here. They liked the trade options, and the Europeans liked the fact that they could trade for lumber, fish, and in particular furs. In fact, it was the beaver trade that saved Plymouth because they couldn't make money any other way. So trading for beaver furs was a key component of their survival. Unfortunately, one of the ships that came over also brought something that no one wanted, and that was disease. In 1619, 1616, 1619, those 3 years, there's many records of thousands of people dying there. So much so that the village of Plymouth or Pawtuxet was completely wiped out. There was nothing but bones on the ground. People had died so quickly that there was nobody left alive to bury the dead. So it was a horrible scene there. But when the Pilgrims who arrived in 1620, remember they came in December, it was terribly cold, took them a long time before they could even get on shore, and when they did, what did they discover? This cleared village, okay, ready for planting, great place, but bones on the ground. What was going on here? There's only one explanation. How did every Englishman interpret every event? Through what book? The Bible. And they felt that God had prepared the way for these pilgrims to come over, okay? Little did they know, because nobody knew anything about infectious disease, what had killed the native population there. So they moved in and began building houses and structures, but didn't encounter any native people throughout that winter. Why? Because the native people were keeping an eye on them. They were fearful that these English people were bringing the same disease and they could release it on them. So they stayed away until they arranged a meeting on March 22nd, 1621, between the governor, Carver, and Usamequin. This is a horrible depiction. What's wrong with this? If you're on the Cape, do you see mountains like that on the Cape? No. Apparently the artist hadn't been there. But they did arrange a meeting, a very important meeting, because Usamequin, with his warriors, was in a down position there because the Narragansetts here wanted to move into that area. It's a very desirable area that they were living in. But they didn't have the warriors to defend themselves. So Usamequin made a fateful decision that he was going to ally with the Pilgrims in Plymouth. And they struck a 6-point treaty here that gave them the opportunity to defend one another and not make war against each other. And it actually saved Usamequin several times. Miles Standish had to come over in 1621 and rescue Usamequin because some Narragansetts had tried to take him captive. Usamequin also headed the Pilgrims off on a plan from the Wassagusset and the Massachusetts tribe that was going to come down and wipe out the English. So that was an important treaty that kept both of them surviving during that time. And it made good sense for at least the first 10 years until some things began to happen. Anybody collect coins here? Anybody seen the Sacagawea dollar coin? Flip it over. That's on the other side. That's the only time the United States government ever recognized this important treaty that took place. It's really unfortunate because in a lot of ways this treaty is more important than the Mayflower Compact, and some would argue more important than our Constitution, because this is what permitted the English to survive here, and then unfortunately for the Poconokeets, for them to prosper. Okay. 2 years after that initial meeting, Ed Winslow, who was like the ambassador for the English, got word that Usamequin was gravely ill. Fearing that he might be succumbing to the same plague, other native people gathered around him, and Winslow took the 2-day journey by foot from Plymouth down to what is today Warren, and found him ailing in his Witu, surrounded by his people. And not knowing what to do and not being a physician, he just gave him some compote and sent for some chickens to make chicken soup, and did whatever he would do with anybody that he knew who was ill. Well, lo and behold, in 2 days, the Massasoit recovers, okay? Had he died, everything would have been different. But the fact that he survived and then said to Winslow, Keen Winslow, you were my friend for life. And he kept his word on that, okay? That was a very important meeting and outcome of that episode. Other people began to visit the area. In 1636, Roger Williams. Anybody know the story of Roger? If you live in Rhode Island, you should know it, okay? Who came over from England after being disgusted with the way politics were going in England and how they were. He grew up in a part of London where they were burning people at the stake. You know, he was a 6-year-old kid running around smelling human flesh burning 100 yards from his house. Who wants to grow up and live there? Okay, so when he heard about America, he decided he was going to come over here, and in 1632 he got on board a ship, came over, and first settled in Pawtuxet. And I'm sorry, not this Pawtuxet, the other Pawtuxet, Plymouth, and got to know Osamequin. They became friends. Roger was great at languages and learned how to speak the Algonquin language. So when Plymouth got tired of his newfangled ideas about the church and state being two different things, they shipped him up to Salem. They got a year of him there and said, no, you got to go. And the authorities in Boston decided to send him back to England in January of 1636. Well, he wasn't going to have any of that. He left before they could get him, walked 60 miles down here, and came to Osamequin's settlement, which is where? Warren. And I came through there and stayed and was sheltered at a place called Margaret's Rock, which you can see today. It's just over the Warren line in Swansea. It's on private property, but I do tours there. This is Margaret's Rock, or shelter or cave, where we believe Roger Williams was nursed back to health because he had triple pneumonia by the time he got there and was rescued by native warriors and nursed back to health for 14 weeks. He writes, for 14 weeks I knew nor bed nor board. In other words, he didn't have any English food or English bed to sleep in. But he did recover there, and Osamequin suggested that he go up to a place in East Providence today at Omega Pond. Anybody ever been to this Roger Williams Spring? There are people who live in the neighborhood have never been there, okay? I didn't know where it was. It's difficult to find. It's along Roger Williams Avenue there. And there is a marker there, but it's 50 yards away from the street, so you have to get out and walk up there, and nobody goes there. And it's next to what is now Omega Pond. That was an opening into the Seekonk River at the time. It's a great place to live. And Roger thought, well, this is terrific. I've been given authority to live here by Osamequin. And so he sent for his family. They came down from Salem, and he planted corn. He was there, got there in April. But by June, when his corn was just starting to grow, Ed Winslow shows up and says, you're in Plymouth territory. You got to leave. Okay. So what do you do with corn that's a foot high? You can't take it with you. So he and his group went on board canoes and went across the river and met Canonicus, what cheer knee top? You ever heard that? It's on If you go to any of the DPW trucks in Providence, look at this city seal. It says, "What cheer?" Okay, that's a greeting, meaning hello, friend. So Roger was able to settle on the Great Salt Pond, which is now part of the river, the Providence River. You know where water fire events are held? Okay, that's what's left of the Great Salt Pond. It used to be a lot bigger. There's a hill up here. That's where the Smith Hill is, where the Capitol building is, okay? The rest of downtown's over here on the left. Over in the distance is Newtoconticut Hill. How many people have been to Newtoconticut Hill? Yeah, that was the western boundary there. So this was the land that Osamequin gave, that Canonicus gave to Roger Williams. So how many people have been to the Roger Williams Memorial on North Main Street? And did you go to the little museum there? They have a great video, and very small. You can do it in 10 minutes. Okay, but that is the site that he was given, and developed a little village there. And over time, more people came to settle there. And what was unique about this village? What was the main difference between this village and Plymouth and Boston and other villages? Religious freedom, right. You didn't have to be a member of a church. You didn't have to go to church. I mean, if you're in Boston and you didn't go to church, you're fined, okay? You didn't have a choice. Here, Roger thought freedom of conscience was important. How many recognize this bridge at the bottom of College Street? Okay, yeah. That's the 8th version of the same bridge that's been over there since Roger's time. He was a toll taker on the original bridge. That's one of the ways he made money. The other way, of course, was doing trading at his trading post. Okay, pardon me? Yeah, North Kingstown, over at Smith's Castle. Yeah, that was his trading post. And he used to row his boat back and forth. Okay, this guy was in good shape, right? So there's still vestiges of that 17th century settlement here, which is important. Not too far away on the other side of the Seekonk River, a group from Weymouth purchased land from Osamequin and set up what is today East Providence, but at that time was called Rehoboth. Okay, Rehoboth got split up into Rehoboth, Seekonk, and East Providence. So the Newman Church, I think I have a picture of that. Newman Church is not the original church, but across the street is the original cemetery. And you can find graves of people from 1658 there. Okay, that was an interesting community in that it was set up around what was called the Ring of the Green. You see the ring? The Newman Church was in the middle, and around that was an open green, okay, where everyone could keep their animals at night. And then the property was set up. You see how the property divisions are set up around that? So you would have a gate at the front of your property. You could let your animals into the green overnight. At the back of your property, because of the 10-mile river here and the Seekonk River here, you had access to water, okay? And your lots were large enough that you would have timber for heating. So it was a great setup. If this guy was in real estate, he'd make a fortune today. Okay. So none of these houses survive today because they were all burned during King Philip's War. Okay. But the site, the location is still there. And here's the grave marker for William Carpenter from 1658. I think that's the oldest marked English grave in Rhode Island. Okay, I can't find anything earlier. So if somebody knows of one, let me know. Not far from there, about a mile from there, is Hunts Mills. Anybody been there? Not too many people go there because it's a little hard to find, but It's a terrific place to visit because you can see the 10-mile river there. An important river for the indigenous people who are living here, largely because of fishing. There's a herring run there every spring you can see, and they have a fish ladder now. And then they built this dam that was then used to set up mills. And there were mills for both grinding meal, and corn and wheat and other foods there, but also later to make textiles. None of the mills are there, but the dam is still there. And it's a great place to visit. So here you have English people moving into Usamequin's territory. Okay, that's essentially the first time they moved into this area. But there were others who also moved in around up in Taunton, over in Swansea, all these little yellow areas. Here's Smith's Castle down here. Of course, in Providence you had settlements, and several settlements in Swansea, and including some that were right close to Mount Hope Neck. Okay, this is where Bristol is today, called Tecumseh is the native name for it. And Usamequin's son was able to occupy this area, but by the time King Philip War broke out, all of this territory around here had been sold into English hands. So by 1675, you had English farms all over this area. What did the English raise? Corn. And what did they feed the corn to? Cows and pigs, okay? If you let a cow out in a English or a native cornfield, what happens to the corn? It's gone. You're right. They can consume an acre in one day. Okay. And then if you have pigs that are on the loose and they go to a clam bed, what do they do there? Yeah, they same thing. Pigs are great at digging up clams. You ever know that? Okay. So the two things that the native people depended on for their food were being destroyed over and over and over again by the English who had moved in, purchased territory. And things were going so badly that native people thought, if we don't do something to get the English out of here, that'll be the end of our culture. So war broke out in Swansea. Actually, the place where it started is now in Warren, right across from the Kickymuit Middle School on Child Street. I have a marker there now. There's nothing you can see there, but that's the location where the first shots were fired in the King Philip's War. And then not far from there, there's another monument where the church was, where people went to shelter themselves, and when they left, went out of the church, several of them were shot. So that was June of 1675 when King Philip, King Philip was the name the Metacom or the Massasoit's youngest son, who was, after the Massasoit died in 61, his son took over control of the tribe. And it wasn't long after that, from 61 to 75, that things got a lot worse. The English were no longer agreeing with the treaty that they had set up. So when the war broke out, you're familiar with the Great Swamp Fight over here? Okay. Anybody walked over there? Okay. It's misnamed Great Swamp Fight. It was really a massacre because here was a whole village in the middle of a swamp. Native people often set up swamps for protection because the English didn't want to go through a swamp. You know, they're in their leather boots and it was terrible. But this winter was exceptionally cold and the swamp froze. So the English were able to march in and set fire to a stockade with 300 to 400 native women and children in it, burned alive, okay? And the ones who tried to escape were shot. The Narragansetts stayed out of the war until that battle. But after that, it was all-out warfare. And all the natives, except those who allied with the English, primarily those on the Cape, were fighting the English from this area all the way up to western Massachusetts. Providence was burned to the ground, even though Roger Williams, as we know, was very friendly with folks there. He couldn't understand why they would do it, but they felt that they had to, that if they were going to accomplish this goal of getting the English out of New England, his town would have to go as well. The war, as I said, went all the way up into western Massachusetts, resulted in the death of 2,500 English people and probably twice or three times as many native people. Nobody was keeping track of native deaths. So those who weren't killed were sold into slavery or shot outright. And that's why, when people come to New England, they say, well, where are the native people? Well, there was a major effort to genocide them, to get them out of here, to destroy them. They did survive, however. The war ended when King Philip was shot on Mount Hope, at the great swamp. In fact, you can visit the location. This is anybody been to Mount Hope Farm in Bristol? Yeah, they can give you directions how to get there. And are you aware what just happened last Friday? Brown University just gave this land to the Pawtuxet tribe. First time in 340 years they've had land. This was taken from them during the King Philip War. You can also see some of the original monuments, the Miles Garrison Monument in a little piece of Swansea in the Barrington there. And if you go to Rehoboth on Route 44, you can find Anawan Rock. That's where the final battle took place. Wasn't much of a battle. They really surrendered at that point. But the rock is still there, and Chief Anawan was the last major leader from the Pawtuxets to be taken captive. And Benjamin Church, who hunted him down, so respected Anawan that they stayed up all night swapping war stories, and then they shipped Anawan to Plymouth, and a few days later they shot him. You can see other native places around here, but what you're going to see are rocks. Okay, native people didn't build structures. Okay, they found natural structures and attributed importance to those structures. Several of them in my territory are Kings Rock and Sacham's Knoll in Swansea. That's on Route 136 across from Johnson's Market, if you ever want to stop there. But there are others like in Swansea behind Town Hall, Abrams Rock, Newtoconnicut Hill we mentioned earlier. If you climb up the hill, you'll find this set of rocks up there. They used to have a council among the 4 tribes in the area there. And then Hipsy's Rock. Anybody been there in Johnston? Okay, I know these are obscure places. Why? Because nobody knows anything about them. But you can find them. They're still there. There are some houses from the 17th century. These are the ones in the Sowams area. But except for the John Martin House in Swansea, these are all privately owned. You can't go inside. But on Sunday afternoons in July and August, you can go to the Martin House in Swansea. And if you come back to Burrs Hill, where I live, I'm just behind this park, you will find a new monument to Usamequin. And as you were told earlier, Usamequin was originally buried there in 1661, because that was his home. In fact, he died in West Brookfield. They carried his body 40 miles down to bury him in the Royal Burial Ground in what is today Burrs Hill. And then our town librarian in 1913, Charles Carr, decided he was going to dig up all the graves there and take stuff and put them in museums, okay? And at that time, nobody thought anything bad about it. In fact, he was trying to save stuff because people were digging things up and taking them home. So he got hundreds of items and put some of them in his little museum in the George Hale Library in Warren. Others went to the Hay Museum in New York, some to Heffenrepper in Bristol, and some to the Peabody Museum in Harvard. So, 1990, we passed the Federal Native American Gravesite Repatriation Act, and the tribes were able to collect all of the things that were taken from these graves and then rebury them, this time in a crypt in Burrs Hill, and put this monument over it. So Usamiquin is back, along with dozens of his other royal family tree there, and you can at least visit the site where that grave took place. This is the tribe today. This is a picture taken last spring. There are over 300 Pawtuxet people in the area. They don't all live, only a couple of them live in Bristol and Warren. The Sagamore lives in Barrington, but most of them live in the whole surrounding area. But they gather once a year, and we have a Pawtuxet Heritage Day in Warren every year, and it was in August, now it's in September. But we want to make sure that people understand that the Pawtuxet people are still alive and well, and that they survived this past 400 years. Anybody been downtown to see this mural on the Custom House? Next time you drive in, go up South Main Street or come down South Main Street, you will see this mural on the building. That depicts Princess Redwing. She's in the picture that the Narragansett woman is holding. Okay. Interestingly, Princess Redwing was both Narragansett and Pawtuxet. Now, you only hear from the Narragansetts that she was Narragansett, but she was also Pawtuxet, okay, mother and father. And now in East Providence, we have a new mural depicting the Pawtuxet chief there. So we're trying to get some recognition. As was mentioned earlier, one of the things we want to do is to develop a national heritage area. You've probably heard of the Blackstone Heritage Area. Well, we want to do something similar. It's going to take a while, and we have to convince our congressional legislators to appropriate the money, as usual. And it's a long process, but the reason that we want this to happen is so that people such as yourselves and other people who come to visit this area will know something about that history. Today, most people think everything happened in Plymouth, right? You want to know about the Plymouth landing and the early pilgrims, go to Plymouth. Well, we work with Plymouth. They love what we're doing, but that's only half the story. You've got to come 42 miles down to Warren to get the rest of the story and explore some of the things here. Your brochure has a whole map. If you go online, on your phone or on a computer, as Charles was saying earlier, you click on any of those items on the map and it'll give you more pictures and a description and a map how to get there and all that. So you can do your own discovery of this area all on your own. Okay, I'm going to finish here. I'll take any questions you might have. Yeah?
I was just wondering how you came to champion their cause to become recognized.
Well, it's not, for the tribe to be recognized?
Yes, for the tribe.
Yeah, they are not recognized. They're not, right. The Pawtuxets are not federally recognized, nor do they want to be. They do not want the U.S. government running their lives. And that's what happens when you become federally recognized. You get money from them, but you have to do things their way. They are working with 9 other unrecognized tribes along the East Coast to get international recognition through The Hague, okay, as a sovereign nation, which they are. They want to deal government to government, not through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, okay? So that's the process underway. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else? Yep.
In the paper on women, brown people land back.
Yes.
There was a weed invention.
That's David Whedon. I'm David Weed. Couldn't get any closer. Oh, Brian Whedon he's the chairperson of the Mashpee-Waukegan.
I've often wondered, so Providence was burned, Warwick was similarly.
Yep.
What about the settlement in Newport?
Nope.
Did they seem to be like sheltered for
They were,
some reason?
right. Lots of people, many of the English people from this whole Bristol, Warren area went there. And Hugh Cole was one of them, who had a farm, was very friendly with Metacomet, King Philip. King Philip warned him, you got to leave. Your house is going to get burned. And he's rowing a boat down to Aquidneck Island, watching his house burn down. But he stayed there during the war. I don't know of any particular troubles that English people on Aquidneck Island had.
Did William Connington have some kind of a relationship with the natives?
With Canonicus,
The other
yeah.
settlement leaders did not.
He got his land from Canonicus. The Aquidneck Island was Narragansett at the time. It had been Pawtuxet, but not at the time of the war. Yeah.
But was not Canonicus did he not participate in the King Philip's War?
After the Great Swamp Massacre, yes. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay.
Very interesting.
Thank you.